Hi, welcome. We're so happy to see you here today at our session. This is going to be session 4C, in case you're keeping track, our poster panel on equity lessons learned. And here today we have Bernil Malcolm and Donna Walker, our panelists. There are a couple of housekeeping things that you've probably heard already. The first is that this session is being recorded. And because of the recording, we've enabled the live transcripts. If you want, you can toggle those off on your computer if you'd like. These will be curated so that they're actual captions later on in the recording, which will also be provided. Another housekeeping thing is that we would love for you to use the chat to ask your questions. And we would also love for you to use the Padlet. Now, the Padlet right now that's on the program is being fixed. And as soon as it is, I will provide it here in the chat. So again, please welcome Dr. Bernil Malcolm and Dr. Donna Walker. I hand over the mic to you.
You are so kind. Thank you for that introduction. We are in fact not doctors, but we will take you. We'll take it. So hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. We are going to summarize the poster that we did, if in case you did not see our video that's already up on YouTube, and then we'll take a couple questions. So my name is Donna Walker. I work in higher ed. Both Bernil and I work at St. George's University, which is a primarily medical university located in the island of Grenada, which is in the Caribbean. My work experience in the past has been in instructional design, specifically for the School of Graduate Studies, where I've worked with the public health field, and I also did some work in faculty development. Now I work as a medical education learning specialist, so I've been in higher ed for well over 7 years. And I see students in the School of Medicine and in the pre-medical pathways programs, which can mean pre-med or any of the programs that lead into medicine, as well as students in the first semester of medicine. And we help them in terms of strategizing their approach to content. And so just to give a little bit of context about SGU before I turn over to Bernil, SGU, we primarily have students from North America, but we do have representatives of students from over 140 countries. So we're pretty global, we're pretty international, which gives us a very unique climate to work with. And we are the #1 supplier of doctors to the US healthcare system. So we typically have a very high stakes environment. And as you can tell from the photo, we have a really stunning campus. So I will turn over to Bernil so he can introduce himself, and then we'll jump into telling you just a little bit about learning strategies and our poster.
Thank you, Donna. So like Donna, I've been in the higher education industry for almost 5 years. My academic backgrounds are in psychology and higher education leadership. And I started off with psychology because I'm really, really passionate about helping people and support. And I figured that I want to do so in the educational context, hence my master's degree specifically in higher education. Now, I've been working in academic support services. Prior to my work here as a learning strategist, I worked as a strategist specifically for professional development. So I worked a lot with clinical students and helping them secure residencies. So I think I have really good experience at both ends of the spectrums, right? So I've worked with them in figuring out strategizing the end of the medical program. And right now I'm working on helping them to strategize as they move through the beginning of the medical program. Like Donna, I work with SOM1 students as well as SOM2 students. And yeah, I will just tell you a little bit more about what our roles are as medical education learning specialists / strategists. And we move into a summary of the poster presentation.
And so for the people who aren't super familiar with our acronyms, SGU is known for our list of acronyms. So SOM is just the School of Medicine.
Thank you.
Okay, so take us to the next slide, Bernil. Okay, so just a quick run through. A lot of people, all the times at conferences, we get asked, what exactly is a learning strategist? And so what we do is that we meet with students in one-on-one appointments, as well as through workshops, as well as through the development of asynchronous content. And we help them with academic and non-academic factors that influence their performance. So the interesting thing you'll find in med school is that we really are getting the best of the best in terms of students, the highly ambitious students, the A students, the top of the class, the valedictorians. And when you put them all in one class, you get a really highly competitive environment where it really comes down to the smallest changes in your approaches to content, really helping you make significant differences in performance. So The volume and pace of medical school is really intense. It's really, I would say, unmatched to many other programs. And it can be a very high stress environment because students are coming to the Caribbean, many of which are from 140 other different countries. So it is a high stress, highly competitive environment. And our role is kind of to meet with students and help them figure out what the best approach is to their learning. So Bruno, if you take us to the next slide, I will just quickly, yeah, so one of the things we really promote is active learning. We really do active learning strategies, whiteboarding, self-testing, retrieval practice, a lot of the big psychological pieces with education, with recognition that learning is very content specific. So as students go through med school, their approach to different blocks, we have a systems approach in our curriculum. So their approach to different blocks has to change based on what they're learning at that time. And it is also very learner specific. So some of our students come into med school with, for example, a master's in biochemistry. So you know they're going to do well in the biochemistry courses, whereas some students come straight from pre-medical school where they may need to spend a little more time on certain aspects of certain topics. We definitely take on a coaching model. So we try to see the same students. We have a team of 17 strategists here. So we typically see students on an ongoing basis and develop that relationship with them. And from our studies, from our research, what we really see is students have an improved performance from meeting with us. So now that we've given you this little context, hopefully our poster makes a lot more sense and you can see some of the things we've done to really promote equity using the technology and kind of the lessons we learned from the pandemic. Okay, so this is an overview of what everything looked like, our study and the lesson that we hope that you guys will take away and see if you can try in your practice. So we're going to go through these in individual sections because it's kind of hard to read as it currently is. So Brunel, can you take us to the introduction? Okay, so what the existing literature has really showed us is that competition really is this part of this hidden curriculum in schools of medicine across the world, just because of the nature of the field. And at SG, we do everything in our power to take that away and to give students a collaborative model. We have peer learning groups, we have review groups that are built into the curriculum, and we have a number of opportunities to really create that. But we still recognize that there is a stigma sometimes in these high-performing students when it comes to help seeking. And so there are a number of things that we see in college students that stop them from help seeking in a number of capacities, and we see all of that at SGU. So what we might find even is that, you know, a student might not want to come to the building if they feel that someone will think I'm here for help, even though there are a number of services we offer in the building, right? So in terms of being mindful of that, we don't see all the students, and there's no mandatory component unless you are performing within a certain academic realm, in which case you are mandated to see us. So one of the things we found from being forced to go online for the pandemic is really this whole idea of using video conferencing to reduce that psychosocial and psychological barrier to equity and barrier to accessing our content. So we found that for many of our students who are not physically on campus, as many of our non-traditional students, as well as the students in our School of Arts and Science and School of Veterinary Medicine, very much benefit from the reduced financial commitment so that they don't have to come to campus to meet with us. They benefit from the time commitment. A lot of our students have families, and some students, not those in the School of Medicine, but some students are working and taking on other initiatives. So they find that the Zoom platform or this sort of online collaborative platform really saves them that time. And one of the things that we really are excited to share with you is this whole idea of being anonymous and how much that has been key in helping us achieve this sort of psychological safety in our appointments and in our workshops, where students can hear perspectives from others without feeling that they are at risk of being exposed for their experiences. So as we, just to wrap up this slide, we do have a lot of asynchronous content we created as part of the experience, and that kind of led to the creation of this model. Students love the time saving, they love the cost reduction. Video transcripts are a big part of all of our asynchronous content, so we have kind of kept up with that beyond the pandemic, even though we are very much an in-person institution. And we also really want to talk in this presentation specifically about the value of live conversations, synchronous pieces, and how we have been able to use the whole feature of being anonymous on Zoom, which we'll show you in our methods, to really create a psychological safe space where students can share a lot of the very stressful experiences of medical school in our workshops without feeling the fear of, you know, I think we've all been in a session where someone says this is a safe space, and it is while we're there, but we're not sure what happens when you walk out of that room and if you have to carry any of that with you. So we'll talk through how we kind of eliminated that barrier with Zoom in our next section. So I'll turn you over to Brunil, and you can have a break from me talking for a while.
All right. So as Donna mentioned, this whole thing just kind of happened. It's kind of like COVID came, we had all these changes. We had to move our fully in-person model of the curriculum and education on a whole to, all right, now we need to cater to exclusively online learning. And then we had to move back to a hybrid model, right? And so all these observations, like all these benefits just kind of happened, right? All these pieces that really contribute to the equity process just kind of happened. But that was exclusively for asynchronous content. And so we figured, how do we try to remove more barriers by making our synchronous services a bit more accessible, right? So we figured, let's test the model. Let's test this out. Previously in the workshops that we would run, we try as much as possible to mimic in-person dynamics in terms of, all right, students should turn their cameras on, everybody should try to collaborate, everybody should, let's interact, let's get to know everybody. We figured, let's not do that, and let's take a less traditional approach, and let's take a more innovative approach. And so we decided, you know what, let's ask the students to rename themselves. Let's create an anonymous space. And those were specifically for workshops focused on credit remediation and test anxiety workshops. Because for those workshops, given how emotionally taxing it could be, students don't necessarily feel very safe to share. It's kind of like, okay, I'm here for credit remediation. It means that I'm failing, all right? And you don't want your peers to know that. You probably don't even want me to know that, right? So we're like, let's try creating a space that promotes psychological safety. And so we said, all right, we created our Zoom links with the waiting room. So before everybody comes into the workshop, we send a message with instructions saying, please remove your pictures and please rename yourself to student. So once you get into this space, you feel safe. Everything's anonymous. I can say exactly how I feel. I can identify with a community of other learners who may be sharing the same experience, right? And so what did we find? We found that we had increased turnout at these synchronous online events, because in the past, when we run these events in person, attendance would typically be low, because it's like you said, you don't want your friends to know that you're failing. You don't want to know your friends to know that you're coming to a workshop because it's credit remediation. All right. So once word started getting around that this is a new model that we're using, more students started coming and more students started coming, plus the quality of the conversations in the chat increased, right? People, they were just being honest. They were just saying things that probably you would otherwise have not heard. I was seeing things and I'm like, what? So people were just being frank. People were being honest. A lot of people, they feel like, imagine I've completed a bachelor's degree in this subject. How do I say I'm struggling with this thing that, supposedly I should have covered in a 4-year undergrad degree. So everything, like, in creating this anonymous space, we managed to see higher levels of trust, honesty, safety, and support, and just a more equitable, psychologically safe space.
And so to add to a little bit of what he's saying is that there are a lot of students who we don't see in our building, and we don't know that we don't see them, but they're not the ones at the forefront seeking our services. And we believe that that is largely because of the psychosocial barrier and largely because of this culture around help seeking that makes it very hard for students to feel, even though our offices are here and we're more than willing to meet with them, that whole barrier to equity is really either walking through those doors or having someone perceive them to be needing help. And we found that the key to that was allowing us to create these safe spaces where students can share that, but also because we hear a lot from our medical students that no one understands what I'm going through. And that is a consistent theme. And no one really does, because they are going through a very stressful process, but now they can share with each other in kind of a bit more intimately what is happening, and just be aware that they are not alone, and kind of create that sense of stronger community, even without identities. And so that was our big takeaway. Just also that we have not been able to replicate this in person. So it's one of those really strong features that technology has really helped us with.
Right. And then, so the biggest challenge with equity, especially in our context, is because we have such a very diverse campus, right? We have representatives, faculty, students, staff from 140 countries, and we have educational programs being offered across 12 different campuses, right? So it really makes the whole dynamic of really streamlining equity and making equity as big as we want it to be quite challenging, right? But then we thought about it and we figured, hey, but we have a very unique opportunity in that even though the educational requirements are dispersed throughout 12 different campuses, everybody must come to the main Grenada campus to complete 1 year of education on Grenada's campus. All right, and so given this, we have a really unique opportunity to try and be a bit more strategic in terms of how do we really tailor and structure these services so that we're trying to create a safe space for students as much as possible. And specifically in our context as learning specialists, how do we really tackle those psychosocial barriers to create a psychologically safe space, right? So in essence, we really wanted to demonstrate how we could truly use technology to create more equitable spaces. With the world transitioning back into in-person, because that's where we're going. A lot of institutions are trying to move fully back into in-person, right? And I'm really, really hoping that we don't abandon the lessons that we've learned over the last 2 years, because we see how this hybrid model actually it really it's helpful, right? I mean, look, just these are just what we've covered in the poster here. These are just some of the benefits that this whole pandemic has brought us through, right? And I'm really hoping that even as we transition and we start viewing COVID as no longer a thing, that we still take all the pieces that really work, especially in the educational context, and we make it work based on all our different contexts.
I think as just to wrap up, as someone who has worked in online education in the past, I know there's always been a resistance in terms of calling technology a tool for equity, even though it's done a lot for us. But I think with this generation of younger students coming into higher ed, with this influx of Gen Z students, and the fact that we've all had that trial by fire with technology and we're all a lot more comfortable, we should really be looking for innovative approaches and at least having something valuable in terms of strategies from this experience that we can leverage going forward. And so this is actually the end of our summary of our poster. So we will save some time for some questions, and then if no one has questions, we will turn you over to Scott and Sonia.
Yes, thank you very much, Donna and Brunel. So right now, I believe Scott is up, and I hope, Scott, you can leave a bit of time for Sonia. Meanwhile, everyone else, if you can put your questions in the chat right now, and then also use the Padlet, because then we can continue the conversation in the Padlet, just in case we run out of time. So thank you very much for your patience there, Scott and Sonia. I hand over the mic to you, Scott.
Okay. It says I cannot screen share while the other participant is sharing, so I'm wondering.
Let me go ahead and make you co-host.
Yeah.
Me
Thank you
jump
so
in there.
much.
Sorry,
Hey, thanks,
Scott.
y'all.
No longer sharing.
All right, so
Yeah.
there you are.
Well, thank you for your
Are
presentation. So
able there?
yeah, let me tell you what I will do. I fall under the heading of delinquent post maker. So that being the case, I've kind of cobbled together some things because I am not for lack of information to share by any stretch. So here's what I will do. I'm going to take about 2 or 3 minutes at the most, since Sonia and I are going to share time here, and then I will turn it over to her. And sometime between now and the end of the conference, I'll get that poster up if you all want to look at that. Let me kind of give you a little bit of background. And we have a 2-part study. Back in 2019, right before the pandemic, my wife and I were looking for a way to go to Ireland, and we found it by presenting at a conference, the World Online Learning Conference. And this is what we presented. We wanted to look at, I direct our EDD program here at Hardin-Simmons, a small faith-based university in West Texas. And when I inherited the program, one thing I noticed is I inherited no student of color in the program. So I thought, interesting. My wife is a chief diversity officer, and we had an interesting cup of coffee one day about this. And so I kind of wondered how our online courses were landing in students of color in general and on a campus, and then in the area. Texas is big. Texas has some unique cultures, so I thought it'd be nice to kind of scope that out. I had some ideas of why we had no students of color in there, but I also wanted to get some data behind it. So we took the DELIS, the Distance Education Learning Environment Survey, and contacted the author, got it modified to add some cultural competency questions in there. So we sent it out to 3 mid-sized Texas universities. Perhaps my wife and I work at some of those. And we, but you'll have to insinuate that from the research, obviously. Now, we had an N of about 250 plus, upwards of 250. So we felt pretty comfortable with the validity of what we found. And the DELIS is a very solid, reliable and valid survey that's widely used, and there's a lot published on it. But we had a hunch. And what we found out from the DELIS was that the students of color in our survey felt these were great courses. They were well designed. Obviously, somebody had been paying their subscription to QM and doing their due diligence in these courses, but it was a loud and clear message from the students. The content and approach to learning were not in line with their culture or ethnic identity. So they said, these are good courses to which we do not belong. Good information. Because we just went with the DELIS. Yeah, they're great courses. But so when we drilled down on that, what we found out, and I'll pull in my other poster. And what we found out from the students was this. We had looked at 5 areas in the initial research that we sent out. And what loaded here, let me pull this slide up, is the students of color basically said that they were differently included in the course. And when we looked at 5 areas, and I'm going to jump around here a little bit, I guess I can do this with my rogue poster, right? We looked at 5 particular areas: messages of inclusion, diverse authorship and textbook and content, iconography, case studies, and diverse assignments. Because what we also realize is the low-hanging fruit is to change the iconography in the course, right? My wife has been used in every single PR promo video at her university, right? So we get iconography. It doesn't always tell the real story that's going on campus, right? And so we wanted to drill down, and the information basically that we found is the students, as the deeper it got into the course, the less students of color saw themselves, particularly in assessments, specifically in case studies, or what they call real life examples. So we did something researchers are never supposed to do. We found out a few students who took our survey, and we took them out for coffee and chatted. And basically what they said is that the course material teaches us how to navigate a Eurocentric approach to the content. And they know how to play that game, but what it doesn't do is equip them for a global or multicultural environment. So we felt like if we're selling a product that says global, and if we're selling a product that's equipping them for the world, we probably want to address that. So our second study that we just did, so I'm going to pull it in here in about 60 more seconds, and I'm going to throw it over to you. So what we did is we wanted to get the faculty and instructional designers' take on this as well. So we did a convenient sample snowball, shot it out. The Online Learning Consortium sent it out. We initially started out with a small N, and it kind of blew up in our faces in a good way. We wanted it to be an exploratory qualitative study, and we ended up with northwards of about 150 N. But we used we took a time frame and settled in on, I think, 27 or 28, so we could kind of look at it and kind of make some judgments. And essentially what we found out, and I'd be happy to give you the academic spiel, but for purposes of our time, what faculty and instructional designers said is, we feel pretty good about the iconography in our course. We feel pretty good about some of the things that we're doing, but we have no idea who wrote the textbook. And all the assignments, we never even really consider a multicultural perspective to the assignments. We just do it to ours. So what basically happened is the students said, this is what we're seeing. And the faculty and instructional designers complemented that to a T. So we kind of feel like we're on to something. Now, some of the reality that we know, rubrics are great. If it's a policy, it's mandated to use it, but we know faculty are uber busy, right? And unless you make me use something, I've got enough scorecards and rubrics and things like that to worry about. And I want to make sure this thing is accessible. I might not drill down and critically look at my case studies and my real world examples to make sure they're multicultural and to make sure the author of my textbook and I'm representing theoretical approaches from a global perspective. So when we're thinking about what can we contribute to DEI in the online space, we wanted to isolate, if you could do one thing as a faculty member or university, what's that one thing that you could do to give it the most equitable platform for students? And we feel like case studies and real world examples are the way to go. Now, right now, we think what's proliferating in the DEI space is a lot of good things, how to create an equitable course, how to create the look and things like that. But we think if you're going to devote your time, there's a place to devote it. And that's kind of what our study is about. And at this point, I'll turn that over to Sonia. And I'm going to unshare. No, they don't warn us, when we're young, that part of what we're going to do when we get through a pandemic is to be unsharing a lot. It's kind of counterintuitive.
That's
All right.
true. Well, thank you very much, Scott. So just a reminder, the Padlet is in function and there are questions there for you in case you want to jump in. And so I will pass on the mic to Sonia Lopez. Thank you for your patience.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. So let me share my poster and kind of navigate through it. Why is it not sharing? There we go. Okay. So this is kind of like the grand scheme of my poster, what I have been working on. This is my first time ever working on an education project. First of all, I wanted to ask, can you see the full poster or do you see the?
No, we're seeing the presentation mode. We're not
Got
seeing
it.
the poster.
Swap displays. Better?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Sorry about that. Yeah. So this is my first time. So please give me feedback. What really motivated this project, sorry to sound so vain, but it was me, kind of talking about, in lines of what Donna was saying earlier is, I'm sorry, what Scott was saying earlier is with his wife was that, there's a person that represents kind of everything. And I've been that person at my institution because I'm at an HSI. And a lot of the conversations that I hear are very toxic in different meetings. And so I was like, I'm really tired of people saying that our students are starting out with nothing or they're behind. I'm really tired of hearing that. And I wanted to present something and a little bit different in my class, as well as allow the students to give them a platform to say something back. Like, don't allow somebody to say something like that to you. So anyways, my motivation was I'm a person of color. I'm from a very low socioeconomic background. I'm a first generation. I'm a female in STEM. I came from a very bad neighborhood and I'm the youngest and only girl of 4. So just kind of put me in this very low status of all status was me. And when I started college, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's going on. And I didn't realize at the time how much wealth that I had and how I wasn't starting from a deficit. And it's when I think back about it, I'm like, I had family that supported me by buying me little things I needed, like my dorm supplies. I had my mother that would send me packaged food during my exam time. I had friends in cultural groups that gave me an opportunity to give back to the community. And I had friends that did somewhat look like me, right? There's some culture, there's some color in there. It's just that there were so few of us, but I wasn't actually in a deficit. I did have a lot of support. And so what sometimes some people ask me is like, oh, well, who inspired you to be in STEM? Nobody, not a single teacher. No one identified me as like, oh, you're really gifted. Even though I was in AP classes, I had A's and B's in biology, chemistry, and calculus. Like no one said, hey, maybe you should try thinking about engineering. And it's because when you see somebody that looks like me, I don't belong in engineering, according to them, right? So I had a very untraditional path. that basically led to a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety when somebody asked me the question, what do you want to specialize in? I'm like, I don't know. This is too much. Like, first generation, I can't figure this out. And so I don't want our students to I don't want our students to feel like that. And so this motivated, this kind of having somebody take an interest in them and presenting it to my team, a faculty here, like if you take an interest and you ask them thoughtful questions and you design it so for different learners, it'll make them feel good. It'll make them feel like they matter. And so the research questions that I had, the goal of the project was to increase the students' sense of belonging. So make them feel like they belong in engineering, and that faculty, their culture, their social network, those are all ways that they're being supported. And so the way that I did that was I started off with just kind of revamping my entire syllabus. You download the traditional whatever syllabus, and I basically added more personal touches. So commitments to them, commitments to my OSD students, commitments to veterans, first generation. I shared a lot about myself and who I am. I also started to develop these concept maps, which from the feedback I got from visual learners is they like to see how things are connected, and they like to see how their prior knowledge is supporting the current material. And I also did regular mental health check-ins. So every single synchronous lecture we had, I checked in and I said, what are you doing? How are you doing? I have examples on what I specifically asked. I also had other surveys that were like, tell me what your stressors are. And that was at the beginning, right? When I really didn't set up that report, just kind of giving them the opportunity, like, oh, if you're working a lot, if this is stressing you out, let me know. If you have kids, this is stressing you out, let me know. Kind of starting with that kind of comfort. And then, we had talked about stress relieving strategies within the first 1 or 2 weeks. How do they relieve stress? I give them a no questions asked assignment extension. And this is specifically for stress, mental health, things like that. It's not the university like allocated, extensions for like sickness and they get those. This is in addition to that. So this is them taking care of other people or they're taking care of themselves and they needed an extension. Then I do these perception surveys. So at the very beginning, I give them a survey that's like, do you feel supported? Do you feel comfortable? Are you enjoying your engineering classes? And then at the end, I ask the same questions, but basically in the context of the class. Do they feel support now? Do they feel like happy now? Do they feel comfortable now? The last assignment that I provide, this is actually my favorite assignment. This comes from the cultural wealth model, where they don't see the categories, they just see the questions, where they're asked to answer this question in 2 to 5 minutes, where they tell me a personal story or an example of when their language benefited their intellectual and social skills within the context of their engineering curriculum. The point of this assignment was to get them to think about what they're bringing in. It's sometimes, like a lot of the times faculty are like, well, how do you know they're successful? And I'm like, if they're able to reflect back and think about these things, right, that matter, then that's successful to me. I think that's getting them on the path of deviating from the deficit thinking and reminding them that they come with value, that they're not starting out in a pit. And so that's the video assignment that they have to do near the end of the semester. These are just examples of check-ins that I have. How do you manage day-to-day stress? Are you involved with clubs? Let's talk about your resume. But the point of this is that I'm the one sharing first. So I basically set that environment of openly sharing with students to say, this is what I did, or this is how I managed this, or this is what I started with. And then I say, what do you think about that? Do you think that's something reasonable? Would you do the same? So instead of it being, how is everybody doing? And get the generic, fine, you're able to, I come up with themes to get them kind of moving through the conversation. And again, it's really brutal in the beginning, because I don't have that rapport. And then as we start going through the semester, the students are like, I want to do a check-in. I want to do a check-in. I want to say something. And it doesn't even have to be on theme. They can say whatever they feel. Like that actually led to the Ukrainian the conflict debate, because that is such an important topic. And I want them to feel comfortable in sharing. And the rules are basically, you share, no one's allowed to comment, and this is not supposed to be a platform to argue. This is just a platform to say what you feel. That's it. Now, this is still the beginning of the semester, so I don't have the end of semester surveys. I literally just sent them. But I really just want to tackle, these students that don't agree that they feel like they belong in engineering, or they're neutral, right? I know this sounds unrealistic, and I know we only have 38 students right now that did the survey, but I don't want to see any blue. I don't like blue. I want to see everybody agreeing or strongly agreeing that they're comfortable in engineering or they feel supported. So I wish I had the post-survey process, but like I said, it just went out Monday, so it's not ready. But what I did do in a prior course is I executed this, the pilot cultural wealth model questions. And what the feedback I got was that a lot of students were like, I didn't realize that this was giving me strength. I didn't realize that that was something to be proud of, like a brother helping them through their curriculum, or like a mom cooking them food. They didn't realize those things. And that was the point, for them to realize, for them to vocalize that and make the connection and share, something. And it's just for me, like, I don't have, I didn't want to share what they said. I'm just sharing my feedback, because I think it's also important to reply to them and say, that was a great example. That was a beautiful story. You're doing a great job. Like, having somebody validate your story or validate your experience, I think is really powerful. And I just freaking wish one person would have done that for me when I was in school. I mean, it happened eventually when I was in college, right? But, and I guess that's where I am too, right? I'm teaching college level courses, but it's just something I think that is powerful to motivate them to do well, not only in my class, but in the curriculum. So this is my learning phase. I'm learning a lot. This is a lot of fun. And I think the last thing I forgot to mention was this was part of it's like an EcoSTEM grant at Cal State LA. So it's changing the ecology in our entire college. It's not just our department. It's not just our classes. It's in our entire college. That's what the initiative of this grant. So that's my spiel. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you very much for that. I know it was a little bit rushed there. We gave you very little time, so
That's
apologies. Okay. But please, everyone, if you can just jump in, raise hands. It's easier if you post your question in the chat. We only have about 5 minutes. There's also the Padlet. You can post questions there, which means that then we have a little bit more time to digest your question and to try to reply. So you all have the floor, I guess. Hands up helps.
While somebody's getting ready to say something, I'd like to thank Brunel, Donna, and Sonia. Wow. Thank you for exacerbating my imposter syndrome by being in the same forum as you all. But it's really fun and comforting to be in the same space with folks who have the same passions. It's reinforcing and energizing. So thank you all. Yeah, any questions or comments for any of us?
Can we share our emails in the chat? Because I'm definitely going to be following up with Sonia to see what her students say at the end of the the semester.
Yes, please, that'd be wonderful. And for anyone who would like, you can also save your chat. So you just open up chat and then you click on the 3 little dots there, and that will help you save the chat for yourself. Right, while you're formulating your questions, so stay on in this same room, in the same session, if you'd like to see the presentation on community of inquiry and emphasis on building a sense of belonging. The presenter is Laura Thompson, and I'm not sure if Laura's already here with us. And Anger Stark is going to be the moderator for that. So thank you for those emails. That's wonderful. I also put in the chat some of, if you're into social media, the Twitter and Facebook, so that we can continue this conversation. There's no reason why we can't continue to talk to each other throughout the year as we find more resources or discover things that are going on in our classes. Thank you for the poster, Sonia.
You're welcome. I'm actually uploading a copy of it now because somebody asked if they could see the questions. Thank you all for the feedback. This is really great. Really nice.
Thank you very much. And also, if you can post these PDFs and presentations and posters in the Padlet, because those will live on a little bit longer and we might not all have access to the chat later. That would also be just really great. We have only 4 minutes left according to my watch here. Does anyone want to give sort of a final wrap up for this? No. Okay, well, I'll thank everybody for coming and joining us today. And go grab your lunch and then come back, so that you can come to the next session. This has been just a real honor. Thank you very much to all the presenters and to the participants. Thank you.
And thank you for moderating our session.
You're
Yes.
very welcome. It was an honor. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, everyone.